Sonic. He's fast. It's kinda in the name. But despite his barrier-busting speed, others have been able to keep up with him, including one with the physique of an egg. And if that wasn't weird enough, now he's driving a car? Why would the fastest thing alive need a car? Welcome back to Loops and Lore. I'm Ben, and today we're going to be thoroughly discussing Sonic's speed and find out if he really deserves the name or if we should just call him Spinny instead. Obviously, we have a lot of ground to cover here. Thankfully, if there's one person who can cover a lot of ground and fast, it's Sonic the Hedgehog. Now, depending on which version of Sonic's origin is your preferred headcanon, there's many reasons as to why Sonic is fast. Maybe it's his shoes, that sweet haircut, a treadmill made by a soon-to-be mad genius, great metabolism, or maybe it doesn't matter and he's just fast. As much as it would be cool to know an official origin of his speed, I think it never being stated outright actually does some service to Sonic's character. Sonic himself may not know, probably because he's too carefree to worry about it. And so, on this one particular point, neither will we. But how fast is fast? Well, in the case of the blue blur, it's all in the name. A sonic boom is a shockwave generated by an object as it crosses the sound barrier. The speed that this occurs at has a lot to do with how high off the ground an object is and the temperature of the air. According to NASA, the speed of sound on an average day at sea level is about 760 miles per hour. And if an object is creating a sonic boom, it is breaking the sound barrier by exceeding that speed. That means that Sonic is able to run at not just 760 miles an hour, but even faster. That's insanely fast. For comparison, the fastest human being, running on two legs, is Usain Bolt at about 23 miles an hour. And the fastest land animal, running on all four legs, is a cheetah, clocking in at around 64 miles an hour. But Sonic is beating both of them by 700 miles an hour. Again, Sonic isn't just going at the speed of sound, he's exceeding it. Though how fast exactly is certainly up for debate. The games, comics, movies, and TV shows certainly interpret the limits of his speed in different ways, some appearing to be faster than others. And while all Sonics are important, we're going to focus on the Sonic of the current main narrative and figure out if he's actually moving as fast as his name suggests. Now, I don't mean any disrespect to the people who spend hours crunching numbers and counting pixels in order to determine how fast a hedgehog can run, but the theories built on that math are wrong. That being said, I will be debunking those theories in a separate video so that for now we can stay focused on the lore. There are a multitude of examples of Sonic actually breaking the sound barrier in-game, and we can divide these into two separate groups: Classic Sonic and Modern Sonic. For Classic Sonic, hitting top speed would allow Sonic to do what, for a video game character at this time, was unthinkable: running so fast he would actually outrun the game's camera and go right off the screen. Originally, this was because of blast processing, but it continues to be a common theme in many of Sonic's 2D adventures, both classic and modern. Of course, in the original games there is no sound, no actual boom. But if you listen to the demo track, theme of Sonic the Hedgehog, from the original game's soundtrack, you'll hear a number of Sonic booms in the background of the music. And just who do you think is making that sound? In the case of Modern Sonic, he breaks the sound barrier in a way that is far easier to see and also hear. In Sonic Unleashed, a new element to the modern Sonic's 3D gameplay was introduced that has remained since: boost. While boosting, the world around Sonic blurs, indicating that he is moving even faster than normal, but the key to telling us that he is breaking the sound barrier is how the game's sound distorts at this rate of speed. It doesn't quite sound the same to us as if a jet flew past us, but that's because we are following along with Sonic. That's why we hear a brief sound like that of a sonic boom, followed by the whistling of the air rushing around Sonic as he continuously moves at these supersonic speeds. Not only that, but the level's music becomes distorted as well and sounds like it's struggling to keep up with Sonic, because in this case, it's too slow. So now that we have validated Sonic's speed, we have a new problem. If Sonic is moving at these crazy velocities, how on earth are his friends keeping up with him? And how is Robotnik able to, for that matter? Is everyone in this world fast? Well, to some extent, yes. Sonic's world certainly is filled with fleet-footed friends, but that doesn't mean they are all as fast as the blue blur. It's all about perspective. Sonic games often allow you to play through the adventure as different characters, like Tails in Sonic CD, Knuckles in Sonic 2, or Amy in Sonic 3 and Knuckles. These characters weren't part of the original adventure, and so their inclusion is merely for our enjoyment, but not intended to be a story-altering canon event. The evidence to support this is in Sonic Mania. At the end of Knuckles' playthrough, we see our favorite Echidna reading to a group of flickies from a book titled Sonic Mania and Knuckles, which is a fun play on Sonic and Knuckles, but also not the game's title, indicating to us that some of what we see in Knuckles' adventure is not entirely accurate. If Sonic and Tails' expressions of irritation and confusion didn't already give that away. Even in these adventures, where there are paths for different characters to take, they are rarely, if ever, faster than Sonic's. Tails' paths often focusing more on verticality, and Knuckles focusing on secret routes and alternate paths that are intended to be more challenging. Modern Sonic adventures express this a bit more openly because of the 3D setting. Here we are no longer simply experiencing old levels with new abilities or routes, but completely different ways to experiment with the formula, expand on the narrative, and add variety to the gameplay in a new set of ways. Knuckles' treasure hunting, Amy's stealth, Gamba's more combat-focused style, and even Big manages to make his own splash. Literally. The best example of the adventure formula is shown in the development of Tails, who goes from levels that are based around keeping up with Sonic to discovering his own path, making total sense as to why his gameplay shifts to mech-based combat in Adventure 2, as this follows a natural progression of his character, doing things that only he can do. But what about Frontiers? Doesn't Sonic, Tails, Amy, and Knuckles all have the ability to boost in this adventure? Well, sure, because we are in cyberspace, where Tails can summon the Cyclone out of nothing but memory data, and Amy can hover around on giant fortune cards. Many of the things that we see are based on these characters' memories, but they're not totally accurate. No different than something that happens in a dream. But the most definitive example of Sonic being the fastest occurs during Sonic Heroes. In the intro video, we see Team Sonic introduced. Tails catches Sonic after a jump, and Knuckles breaks down some falling rocks in front of their path. But as a cloud of dust races up behind them, Sonic grabs onto both of his friends and pulls them right past another set of crumbling rock towers. Just before this, we see them all running together just like they do in the game because, yes, they are all fast, but it's Sonic's speed that gets them through because he is the fastest. Now, you might say that this is merely the intro to the game and not solid enough for you. Okay, that's fine, because there is a second example of Sonic being the fastest, and we don't have to look very far. In the following cutscene, which is the first story scene for Team Sonic, Tails and Knuckles are trying to catch up to Sonic, not on foot, but in the Tornado 2, which is in jet mode, suggesting that Tails had just picked up Knuckles from the floating island and immediately went to find Sonic. When Tails goes to hand Sonic Eggman's note, Sonic jumps up, grabs the note, and proceeds to read it while running backwards. The Tornado 2's jet engine is screaming, while Sonic is running the exact same speed as before, backwards. Backwards. His feet are blurring from the speed as he is keeping up with a jet that was custom built by Tails, and Sonic is not even paying attention to where he is going. Backwards. But being the fastest isn't just about pure speed, it's also about stamina. It's one thing to run as fast as you can, but you'll run out of energy eventually. In the case of Sonic, he never really stops, with most adventures taking place not long after, if not immediately after, the previous one. Animated scenes added into Sonic Origins show Sonic zipping off immediately after the events of the first game. And then, after saving Little Planet, he hops into the tornado and heads right away to West Side Island, where he hits the ground running again. And there is certainly no time to stop and rest between Sonic 3 and Sonic and Knuckles. In the modern adventures, it's pretty much the same story. Sonic takes off running after the ending of Adventure, Heroes, Unleashed, Forces. Sonic does not stop. And when he does take a break, it's not for very long. But the very best example of Sonic stamina is in the IDW comics. While trying to stave off the metal virus, Sonic is forced to run or succumb to the infection. He even hops on a massive hamster wheel to run it off and continues to attempt to outrun the virus to the point of sheer exhaustion. Sonic gets infected in issue 15, and this lasts all the way until issue 29, but even after the virus mutates to the point that he can't run it off, we never see Sonic sleep this whole time. Think about how good at going fast you would have to be to run like that for that long. None of Sonic's other friends even attempt to outrun the metal virus because none of them are fast enough to do so. But if Sonic is able to move at supersonic speeds, and his body is clearly up to the task, how is it that he is unable to keep up with Eggman? Some say it's his protein-filled diet of nothing but eggs and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, with the peanut butter on both sides so the bread doesn't get soggy. Or maybe it's Eggy's crazy physical fitness routine where he dances it all away. Maybe he stands at his desk. Even if we're looking at the absolutely shredded version of Eggman from Sonic Boom, he still shouldn't be able to outrun the fastest thing alive. So how did he do it? We could try to blame this on something outside of our control and simply say, because video game, but I want to try to find a more lore-based reason for this explanation. First, we have to remember that these two instances occur on the Death Egg. The last fight of Sonic 2 and one of the final fights of Sonic and Knuckles. These are the two infamous instances of Robotnik outrunning Sonic. Not even with the aid of the Eggmobile or any other tech, but on foot. At least, as far as we know. We do know that the Death Egg has some type of artificial gravity, as we can see demonstrated during the second act of the Death Egg Zone in Sonic and Knuckles. Obviously, Robotnik had intended for the Death Egg to be in space, so he probably had a plan if the artificial gravity was to fail. That might not affect all of his robots, but it would certainly have an effect on him. This means he would have had to design his suit to operate in low gravity, which may have given him an advantage over Sonic that he wouldn't have normally. That's of course assuming that Sonic was getting any traction to begin with. In Sonic CD, Sonic gains a new move called the Super Peel Out. Different from the Spin Dash, this move allows Sonic to build up speed in place by running as fast as he can to the point where he can't get any traction. That is, until you let go of the up button and his body is finally able to catch up to his feet. We see Sonic use this move in the opening of Sonic CD, when Sonic spins his feet as fast as he can to try to stay above the water, and again in the opening of Superstars, where Sonic is once again running forward so fast that he cannot get any traction. We could argue that Sonic is attempting to move so fast to finally catch Robotnik in either of these two adventures that he is getting ahead of himself and struggling for traction, especially if there was something off about the Death Egg's gravity in either of those two moments, and especially if Robotnik's suit gave him a specific advantage on the Death Egg. This would allow Sonic to be moving fast enough to spin his feet, appearing to be running at full speed, but still not enough to catch Eggman. There is also a theory that, at this point, after 3 full adventures leading up to this moment in Sonic 2, and an additional 2 adventures leading up to the similar moment in Sonic and Knuckles, Sonic may have just been tired out. This would make sense if not for the fact that he then fights the Death Egg Robo at the end of Sonic 2, and fights the Grand Egg Robo twice in Sonic and Knuckles. After that fight, Sonic races to catch up to the Eggmobile, which Eggman normally uses to escape, and is finally able to ground it. Plus, in both games, Sonic would then proceed to go Super. In Sonic 2, he uses this power to fly, and in Sonic and Knuckles, it's the final showdown in space. Something Sonic would not have been physically prepared for if he was so tired that he couldn't even catch Robotnik. With all of that laid out, there's still one answer left. The one thing that everyone seems to avoid. What if Sonic wasn't trying? Sonic doesn't outright hate Eggman. He hates seeing his friends imprisoned or hurt, but Sonic doesn't want to see Eggman destroyed. This becomes more obvious in later games when we see the blue blur being quicker to taunt Eggman than he is to fight him. And in the opening of Sonic Unleashed, Sonic tells Eggman that if he had just played nice, he wouldn't have to break all of Ivo's toys. And in Sonic Colors, Sonic and Tails don't show up to Robotnik's theme park guns blazing, even though they suspect he is up to no good from the very beginning. Sonic can roll up into an anthropomorphic buzzsaw, breaking through machines and walls alike. Do you really think that it's by accident that he hasn't turned Eggman into nothing more than a pile of mustache clippings by now? To really understand this, we need to look less at what Sonic is and more at who he is. If you listen to either version of Sonic's amazing theme song from the adventure games, you'll understand that what Sonic has always stood for was freedom. Not through strength or law, just freedom. Once Robotnik is out of ways to take away the freedom of Sonic's friends, he's out of there. Sonic doesn't have a reason to end Eggman because, despite being a villain, that would mean taking away Eggman's freedom, and that's not what Sonic is about. Like the song says, he's living by his own reasons, and it doesn't matter who is wrong or who is right. Sonic will do whatever he feels is the right thing to do in that moment. We could really learn a thing or two from Sonic, as we often find any reason to disagree with each other, often to the detriment of our own humanity, whereas Sonic manages to make friends with a number of his enemies and even fights alongside them to save the planet. Consider this. If Sonic had finished off Eggman at the end of Sonic 1, Sonic would never have met Amy, Tails, or Knuckles. This would have held Amy and Tails back immensely, but also would have left Knuckles to fade away after a lonely existence on Angel Island with no one to remember his culture, or protect the Master Emerald from evil people in the future far worse than Robotnik. But by far, the worst outcome would be Black Doom awakening Shadow instead of Eggman. An event that would have probably caused the destruction of the Earth. Shadow would have followed in Gerald's post-arc protocol, double-crossing Black Doom with no Amy to remind him of Maria's wish. The resulting disaster would have no doubt released Dark Gaia, Iblis, and the End simultaneously, which would have had untold consequences on the wider universe. Sonic's decision not to end Robotnik had a cascading effect of net positives, despite all of the bad deeds Eggman would go on to perform. In a way, this makes Sonic a bit like a certain bald man in a black muscle car. Not just because both of them have a need for speed, but because they both have a tendency of turning enemies into friends and allies. Both believing that by showing mercy to an enemy, they can change that person for the better. In the IDW comics, during the fight with Surge, Kit tries to call out Sonic for attempting to get Surge to join his side. Kit believes that Sonic's habit of trying to turn enemies into friends is self-serving, stating that Sonic is only doing it to prove his ideals as the only ones that matter. I wanted to note this specifically because it's a weird moment where the writers seem to have forgotten whose story they're telling. Sonic is the hero, the knight in shining armor. He's the North Star of this whole series. Sonic is trying to save Surge from her self-destructive behavior and help her to gain the same sense of freedom that he has. Not because Sonic is some self-righteous do-gooder. Going back to his theme song, it doesn't matter who is wrong or who is right. Sonic wishes to be free and for everyone else to have that same freedom. So, why the car? To mention IDW again, in the Sonic 30th Anniversary comic, we get to see Sonic receiving some driving lessons from his new friend Kip. Not because Sonic has any use for a car, as he makes sure that Kip is painfully aware. And not because he ever gets tired, simply because there is a race for a lifetime supply of chili dogs and Sonic can't enter it on foot. Now, the chili dogs here are the main motivation, but I think it's reasonable to assume that if Sonic ever happened upon a race that was occurring along his adventures, he would want a shot at the finish line anyway. Sonic is a competitive individual, as all lovers of speed are. We see that competitive nature on display in Sonic Riders. Sonic could have easily caught up to Jet on foot during their first meeting, and when he gets knocked off the extreme gear, he doesn't let Jet get away because he was physically hurt. The only thing Jet bruised was his pride. Even then, Sonic is not about to be the slowest in anything, and instead of staying knocked down, he decides to practice his skills and make Jet eat some crow. That's the second time I've insulted Jet in one of these conversations, and I'm not sorry. Team Hedgehog. Going all the way from Sonic Drift to Riders and to the newer Sonic racing games, Sonic's vehicles are always speed-based, because if Sonic is going to ride a board or drive a car, you better believe it's going to be fast. He may be up to the challenge of using a vehicle as opposed to running on foot, but he isn't going to let that change who he is. Sonic's speedy style will always shine through. But can that speed shine through a dark and gloomy cloud? Or at least a dark and gloomy hedgehog? This is a highly debated and controversial topic, with the official word bouncing around more than Sonic does in Springyard Zone. So, is there a way we can find the answer for ourselves? Well, in Sonic Battle, the run styles for Emerald seem to indicate that Shadow is faster than Sonic. However, other than racing games where the playing field is more level for everyone, the only time we see Sonic go head-to-head with Shadow, Shadow is wearing his air shoes. So it's not entirely a fair comparison. Even Shadow's boost involves him using his air shoes like rocket boosters, as opposed to Sonic needing to actually run faster. Leaving us to wonder if Shadow can run that fast without his boost boots. Shadow's gameplay often involves a lot of warping, chaos control, and of course his air shoes. So if he suddenly had to rely on speed alone, it's more likely that Sonic would definitely win. On the other hand, as we have previously discussed, the air shoes are really just a way for Shadow to harness and use his own power. To say that's unfair would be like telling Sonic that he can't wear his signature kicks either. Then again, while Sonic and Shadow have a strong rivalry, speed is more Sonic's game, whereas Shadow is more likely to fight someone than race them. Suppose for a moment that Shadow was to set the fastest time racing through Green Hill Zone. If Sonic was to then go and beat that time, do you think Shadow would go back and try to beat it again? Probably not. Shadow also doesn't claim to be the fastest thing alive, but the ultimate life form instead. The title of fastest specifically doesn't matter as much to him as it does to Sonic. In Sonic X Shadow Generations, Sonic appears to beat Shadow and take the Chaos Emerald as his prize. Of course, Shadow appears to throw the race in order to give Sonic the Chaos Emerald and maintain the continuity of the game with the original generation story, leaving us to wonder if Sonic is faster or not. However, the original race on the Ark could have only played out one way, with Sonic winning. At the end of Adventure 2, even before the two Super Hogs stop the Ark, it seems obvious that Shadow is running out of stamina. We could blame this on the fight with the Bio Lizard, but Sonic had also been running full speed to make it to the cannon's core before Shadow had even shown up. And that was directly after their fight. If Shadow had beaten Sonic, not only would Sonic not have been able to slam dunk the Emerald into the cannon, but they would both have been equally as exhausted. Sonic probably more so if he had lost. But if Shadow had lost to Sonic, and then had the fight with the prototype of the ultimate life form, it would make sense that he would already be past his limit during the final battle in space. So, the only lore justifiable reason is that Shadow did in fact lose that race, proving once again that Sonic is the fastest thing alive. And with that, I'm Ben. This has been Loops and Lore. Thanks for watching.